are going to wind up having a backup matchup between our players, Jeremy and Duda. A good old friend Duda playing his Svelte red deck, and Jeremy going to be playing a loaner deck from the store, the mono blue spirits deck. Jeremy wound up playing the Azoria spirits deck a couple of weeks ago. I remember overhearing him talk to Garrett about the differences between Azorius and mono blue. Meanwhile, Duda on his Svelte red deck means that we're going to have a double version of monocolored decks being set up on the stream. Like you can see in front of me, Eric is going to be changing the overlay of everything and making sure that we have everything set up so we can jump into game as soon as the players are ready and moved on over. So this will be an interesting matchup between two monocolored decks, and kind of thinking back to standards past, cast our minds back to a realm of the first version of Ixalan and Dominaria's return. We had Amonkhet in the format as well. Mono red aggro, being able to play a bunch of wizards, being able to play wizards lightning and those kinds of spells, going up against the mono blue aggro or tempo deck that was playing things like Tempest Djinn and all of these low to the ground creatures with Curious Obsession. This harkens back to that style of metagame play, as we wind up having the spirits deck trying to do the same sort of mono blue tempo thing, only Duda's red deck is a little more svelte than aggro from last time around.
For sure. And Duda did take game number 1 here between Jeremy and himself. So Jeremy be on the play here, but was on a Moldus 6 if I heard correctly.
All right, so Duda is going to be starting off here by swinging in with a Rabbit Battery here, taking 1 damage over to Jeremy's side, where a Supreme Phantom winds up being cast from Jeremy's side on the mono blue spirits deck, which is going to be a +1/+1 to all of the remaining spirits.
Let's see, Mutavault for turn for Duda, and oh my god, Runaway Steamkin, one of my favorite pet cards.
This this actually was a card in the deck that I was just harkening back to. The Runaway Steamkin literally lets the red deck run away with the game sometimes.
Yeah, very, very strong card if you let it stick around, just because it pumps itself up, but also it will just make a bunch of mana. Considering that Duda is in a mono red deck, he gets a lot of value out of the triple red, unlike some other versions that might run this card. Alright, fixing my mic.
Yeah.
It keeps dropping for some reason.
So in the meantime, though, we do wind up having Jeremy just passing the turn. Very common play for this blue deck, since it's basically an instant speed play deck. Most of its spirits have flash, and if you have Rattle Chains, they all do. But it looks like a Hired Claw comes out here from Kevin Duda. This is a standard all-star. Went undefeated in the rounds of Swiss at Worlds.
Yeah, new tech coming out of the mono red list, I think by Quinn, I forget his last name.
Quinn Tule? I forget.
Yeah.
Man, I said the name like 5 times in my Worlds recap video, and I just remember Quinn, so.
But no, very, very strong card. Just being able to get yourself extra value, but also just sink mana into it just to be able to make this Hard Claw slightly bigger. Oh, Spikefield Hazard pinging the Supreme Phantom.
All right, so what we have Duda doing here is generating basically a mini storm count in order to get counters on this Runaway Steamkin and try to not only pump up for some damage to potentially trade with this Supreme Phantom, but also see if Jeremy's going to bite and counterspell something. But looks like there's a Brazen Borrower in Jeremy's hand, and that would be devastating for all these spells pumping up this Steamkin.
I also see an Ether Gust, which would also be a blowout right here. Because Duda does not have enough counters on the Steamkin to be able to remove them for mana value right now, so all his effort is for not with the Ether Gust that just got played.
Yeah, I say Jeremy was kind of like that meme where you're wiping your tears with money from Zombieland. It's just like, oh no, I have a plethora of riches. What shall I do with it? Ether Gust being the play here is going to force Duda to decide whether he wants to redraw the Steamkin, which is probably bad with a card like that, or put it on the bottom of his library, which is what Duda chooses to do.
Yeah, it looks like Duda has a Saga in hand, a Remnant Ruins, and one other card I couldn't see yet. But what is that, Curious Obsession?
Oh yeah, this is the mono blue mainstay here. Curious Obsession comes down and pumps up the Supreme Phantom as +1/+1, and as long as we have Jeremy attacking, it's going to stick around and it's going to draw some cards whenever it connects. So we wind up playing an additional island. We have lots of open mana, and this is the play pattern where blue spirits thrives best.
Definitely. It's kind of funny. I play multiple formats, so looking at Jeremy's mana base right now, I'm like, oh, An overloaded break the ice.
All these snow-colored permanents, snow permanents are going to bite the bullet. And of course, the blue Spirits deck specifically is playing snow-covered islands because of Ancestral Spirit and being able to basically be a hero of destiny to pump itself up and level itself up by using all of these snow mana. Lightning Axe here from Duda, though, discards a Smuggler's Copter to cast this. This is exactly 5 damage to the Supreme Phantom with exactly 5 toughness, and Jeremy might have exactly a counterspell.
Brazen Borrower, return. Oh, shoot, that's permanent.
Oh, Brazen Borrower don't work that way. Brazen
Brazen Borrower does not work that way. I thought he had a counterspell in his hand. Doesn't he have some sort of denial?
There's a Geistlight Snare in hand, so even if Duda forces him to resolve this here, we are just in weeklies. This local event, pretty friendly. Sometimes people let you take stuff bad, but we can wind up. So it does look like that now that Jeremy's cast it, he's gonna have to force to do it, and instead just like, well, I still got this Geistlight Snare, so.
I have a little thing for that.
Alright. Geistlight Snare. He does cast a creature and an enchantment.
Duda could have paid for that.
He could have, so it makes me kind of curious what he has in here.
Looks like Duda's gonna unload his hand here. All right, there's the Hired Claw that just got bounced back. And maybe just Kamano?
It might just be a mutable angle.
All right, so we're just swinging for 3. And that's a lizard, so that's 4.
Okay, yeah, for 1.
Hired Claw does say if attacking with a lizard causes it to deal 1, and Mutavault most specifically is a lizard amongst being a demon and an angel and a merfolk and doctor.
I'm kind of curious why Duda didn't decide to pay for the Geistlight Snare. Jeremy had 1 card in here, tapped out, and the Supreme Phantom's going to be drawing an extra card in turn at this point.
Yeah, Duda may have wanted to do something along those lines, but it looks like instead it's just going to be... Looks like there was a slip out the back played at some point too on the... Oh, did they slip out the back instead of casting Geistlight Snare and I just wasn't paying attention? That may have been what happened.
Oh, yeah.
So then Duda is looking to maximize damage. Okay, so it was slip out the back instead of Geistlight Snare, so it phased out the Supreme Phantom, kept the Geistlight Snare available, and now with a Mausoleum Wanderer as well, it is going to be very difficult for Duda to resolve a burn spell to kill one of these creatures.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mausoleum Wanderer, one of those counter spells on a stick, also buffs itself whenever another spirit enters the battlefield as well.
And with this Lord effect in play, it's a 2/2, so you sacrifice and it's basically a, it's a Spell Pierce.
Oh, and there's the Ascendant Spirit you were talking about earlier.
This card's a house if it gets rolling. Ascendant. All right, well,
Why
showed
did
up
we
in
get
Spanish
the
first. But this card is the entire casa, if you're talking Spanish. You level this one up like a hero, like a figure of destiny. Becomes a 2/3 if you tap 2 snow mana. If you tap 3 mana, if it is a warrior, in a 2/3, it becomes a flying angel spirit warrior, which is a 4/4. And if you tap 4 snow mana, it basically winds up being a 6/6 flying, which then has Curious Obsession on a stick. So this card, very big reason to play mono blue, very big reason to play these snowlands. Actually, almost the entire reason for playing the snowlands.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other payoffs in this deck for it, but very, very strong. Also, very good way to use up your extra mana if you happen to be holding up counter magic or anything like that. So kind of does everything the deck wants you to do.
All right, so we see Duda doing some interesting stuff here. Winds up activating the Mutavault again, and then uses the ability of Hired Claw here to put a +1/+1 counter on it because you've attacked with a lizard. It deals 1 damage. That grows the Hired Claw, which makes it harder to block. But instead, we are just going to wind up having Jeremy takes that 1 damage, levels up the Ascendant Spirit, makes it a 2/3. So that's just going to bounce off of this Hired Claw here.
This is a 2/3, yeah? This is also 2/3.
Right now it's a 3/4.
Oh.
It's
Yeah,
a
it does get
3/4
plus
because,
+1.
yep.
So Duda pointing out that, hey, you're blowing me up. Don't take that lightly. But he is going to take 3 damage still, so Duda has Jeremy down to 10. And if Duda's deck is looking similar to the way it was before, we could wind up having things like Fiery Temper. We have that Ramanump Ruins there. That's 5 virtual damage right there, which is still not quite enough to kill Jeremy at this point.
Yeah, unfortunately not. Jeremy is looking like he's turned the corner a little bit in this game. Having both Geistlight Snare and Slip Out the Back exactly when he needed it, I think is super backbreaking for Duda here. And Ether Gust.
I'm gonna go.
I think it all started with that Ether Gust.
It all started with an Ether Gust.
I'm going to attack with.
Something about color hosers, something, ruining my magic experience, something. But it looks like here we are just going to end up having a swing in that is 3 plus 3 is 6. Duda's going down to 9. We get a quick draw card from the Curious Obsession, and Jeremy may just pass the turn with open mana and waiting to pump up that currently Spirit Warrior that might be a Spirit Warrior Angel next turn.
Yeah, I think he also has another Brazen Borrow in hand, if I saw correctly.
Yeah, there it is. So we still have Geistlight Snare, we still have Brazen Borrower, and Duda has a Kumano and a land, it looks like.
Ooh, not what he wants to see at all. Unfortunately, 3 mana.
Oh, it's
Not a
Fable.
Kumano.
Okay, it's Fable the Mirror Breaker.
I'm gonna have to. Counter.
That's arguably a little bit better, but that is going to be met with that Geistlight Snare, and Duda no longer has the mana to pay for that one, so Geistlight Snare is just going to hard counter that.
All right. And
Yeah, Duda not having any good.
flash. I can play this.
Oh, flashing in the Brazen Bar.
And then-
3, 5. That's game.
Yeah, and you can just make the Ascendant Spirit a flyer, and that's going to be Jeremy on the Mono Blue Spirits deck, evening things up here, 1 apiece between him and Duda. It's all going to come down to decisive game number 3.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, right. Instead of playing the
We see a lot of these matchups in the store. Everybody likes to bring their own brew. We always have, some amount of monocolored decks. Although we haven't had a humans player in a while.
We had a Humans player 2 weeks ago, but it wasn't Mono White. It was the Orzhov Humans deck that Garrett lets people borrow.
Yeah, personal favorite of mine. Very good list.
I'm actually interested in seeing Azorius Humans, which is just basically Mono White Humans with Mockingbird.
Mocking humans.
Mocking Humans? 'Cause then so you have access to Mockingbird in the main deck, so you wind up giving yourself extra things like extra copies of Thalia's Lieutenant, extra copies of Brutal Cathar if you need it, like whatever utility human you need, you have extra copies of. And then in your sideboard, you get like Spell Pierce. And you get interactive tempo spells, which now all of a sudden, like when combined with Thalia's tax effect, you can just keep up your 2 mana, spell pierce your opponent's thing, which then becomes mana leak because of Thalia's tax.
Yeah, it's pretty relevant. Plus, with blue, you also get more relevant counter magic like Protect the Negotiators, which counters based on how many creatures you have, I believe. Much more powerful than, say No More Lies or anything like that in the deck.
Yeah, and in this matchup specifically, we did wind up seeing already that Jeremy had some specific sideboard cards to play against Duda's deck. The Aether Gust were a very big one there, as that was specifically targeted at the red and green decks in Pioneer. Gets rid of Fable the Mirror Breakers, winds up bouncing a bunch of problematic red cards, in addition to being able to deal with some of like the more 4-color decks that are green based that we wound up seeing a little bit earlier. And this is going to wind up being just a very powerful utility card. No doubt that there's also been a couple of other bounce spells put in. I don't think Brazen Borrowers, like in the amount that we've seen from Jeremy's deck, are all in the main deck. Those are probably going to be some sideboard versions of that coming in. But on Duda's side, we know that there are cards like Rending Volley in the format, and there's probably going to very quickly being jammed into that sideboard if they weren't there before.
Yeah, Rending Volley very powerful here because the biggest thing with Spirits is just they're flyers, and also there's a lot of different counter magic that can come out of the deck. And so having the way to remove them really easily and not be countered is probably how Duda's going to get through for the win here.
Oh yeah, and Duda of course is going to be on the play as well, so even though his deck is more of a svelte red deck than a red deck wins type thing, we did wind up seeing a lot of 1-drops in that game, and I know he's packing cards like Bomat Courier, unless he's changed those around as well. So Duda getting an explosive start with something like red 1-drop into Runaway Steamkin, into multiple red drops, into a Fable the Mirror Breaker backup, and just flooding the board with things on turn 3. Very possible outcome.
Yeah, definitely. I think Duda wants to see, like you said, 1-drop, 2-drop, but also if he has any way to try and refill his hand, it would be good, just because Jeremy has a lot of disruptive, not necessarily like counter magic, but stuff like Ether Gust, which involves bouncing, kind of out-tempo your opponent. So being able to, you know, draw additional cards, try and get out of the bog that he has you trapped in, would be pretty important for Duda here.
I'm actually kind of interested if Duda's changed up the deck at all, because the old version I'm thinking of, he had the Smuggler's Copter still.
Yeah.
But there's also Inti in the deck. And like turn 2 Inti also seems pretty powerful when you're running people over at low drops and discarding cards that could potentially be madness into play.
Yeah, I'm really interested too, because Inti Smuggler's Copter, I think, is among the strongest 2-card combos in the entire format. Just
No bias from you. No bias from the Insole player.
No. Totally not. But just because it gives counters, it gives trample, it also just gives you a way to turn your discards into extra cards as well. So having Smuggler's Copter, or even like we saw Fable and the Mirror Breaker out, just gets you insane card selection from just being able to pitch cards. And once again, being able to cast stuff for Madness, the Fiery Tempers being able to take stuff out. Because at this point, like, if your opponent sacks a Mausoleum Wanderer to try and counter your Fiery Temper, you're still 1-for-1ing your opponent. You're not mad about that.
Oh, 100%. It looks like Jeremy is going to be taking a mulligan to 6. Meanwhile, Kevin Duda keeping his hand to 7. I saw a Hired Claw, at least one Mountain Spikefield Hazard, I think double Bowmat Courier and Smuggler's Copter. That may wind up being either a Rending Volley or Witch Stalker's Frenzy in hand. That means that there's one untapped mana, comes into play tapped mana, and a hell of a lot of 1-drops in hand.
Yep, so Duda keeping a more aggressive hand, being able to try and out-tempo Jeremy here, specifically with Spikefield Hazard, being able to hit a 1-drop early on, I think is really important. Oh, Jeremy going to 5.
Oh, that's not where you want to be as a tempo deck. You're mostly about trying to keep the pressure on your opponent by staying slightly ahead, and tempo is the word that gets thrown out, but staying slightly ahead on board and potentially cards in hand from what your opponent is going to be doing. When you're starting the game as a mulligan and you're on the draw, it's fine. You're technically going back up to 7 cards. You play a little bit of a 1-for-1 type game, and you can still eke out some advantages over your opponent. But when you're going down to 5 cards and you need at least 2 lands to really play a lot of things from your deck, you can only really have like 1 utility spell in hand there in order to have like your ideal start with air quotes. And that's going to mean that if Duda has multiple threats, you're not going to be able to answer them.
Yeah, that is kind of rough. So Jeremy definitely want to see some amount of, you know, curiosity, curious succession kind of effects to try and refill his hand as soon as possible. But I mean, like, card selection's a little sus at 5 cards, unfortunately. I see a Rattle Chains, I think I see a Brazen Borrow, and Ascendant Spirit.
I think it's Rattle Chains, Ascendant Spirit, Curious Obsession, Faceless Haven, Land. Oh, is Jeremy only on a mulligan? Oh, he's only on a mulligan to 6. Why did I think he was on a mulligan to 5?
I thought it was 5 as...
Jeremy may have just been still shuffling when we joined in, and Judah had already drawn his cards. So,
Gotcha.
all right, mulligan to 6. We're fine. We're just sitting here doom and glooming, and it's still just a mulligan to 6. But Bowmat Courier winds up being the play on turn 1 from Kevin Duda. Swings in for 1, puts a card underneath it, technically just being exiled face down, and then passes the turn to Jeremy, and there's that Ascendant Spirit.
Spirit is here. I hope Duda draws another land here. Oh, and it is a mountain. So I think he might Spikefield Hazard the Spirit here.
There we go. So Ascendant Spirit is down because it's only a 1/1 when you first play it. That's going to Spike
Courier 2.
All right, Electric Boogaloo, let's go. Double Bowmat Courier, 2 cards coming off into exile, 2 damage coming across to Jeremy, and Duda's off to the races.
Yeah, so Courier, especially in this matchup where Jeremy doesn't really have removal, he can Brazen Borrow to try and bounce it, but that's kind of the only thing, unless the Couriers die in combat, which it might. We did see a Rattle Chains in hand. Duda's just going to be able to pretty safely jam out his whole hand and then be able to refill it by sacking the Bowmat Couriers.
All right, Duda very wisely, waiting to see what Jeremy's play is going to be. And it looks like nothing is going to get done here, but Duda did not top deck an additional land, so it may just be a turn off here to play Runaway Steamkin and hopefully have that resolve to spew out those 1-drops for value.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see it here.
And
Oh,
step 2, flash.
Flashing and rattle chains, not counter.
Okay, so we just wanted getting the rattle chains in play. So the runaway Steamkin is still alive. We did see an Aether Gust in Jeremy's hand, though, so this may wind up being a repeat of game number 2, where this runaway Steamkin starts running and then trips.
Yeah, how do you trip with wheels? Actually, it's not even wheels.
It's steam.
It's just steam.
I guess you just kind of go like, and that's it.
Second
Yeah,
land.
the Steamkin got doused.
All right,
No
well,
more fire.
Curious Obsession. Poor Steamkin. That's like, I wonder if the Steamkins are like Charmanders, where if their tail goes out, they just die.
That's a good question, actually. Well, they have to have some amount of water, right? Because they make steam.
I guess so. All right, so we had Curious Obsession, and we wind up having a combat research coming down post-combat. So that's going to be 2 draws that you can get off of that, but only +1/+1, because combat research does not give the ward and +1/+1 unless you are a legendary creature.
Fiery Temper is here. There's the really funny line of discarding your whole hand right here, and then madnessing the rattle chains.
That might be true, but looks like we just be Hired Claw. We're swinging in. We get 4 damage across altogether. Still not nothing, putting Jeremy down to 11 in this situation.
Yeah. I think it's also a copter in hand.
This by 3, so
Oh, Witch Stalker Frenzy. Oh, 1 mana, 1 mana. What do you got? What do you got? Oh, slip out the back for Jeremy here.
All right, so Slip at the Back is going to wind up saving the Rattle Chains. However, this still does pump the Steamkin, so that's winding up being 5 damage coming across.
Yeah, kept Duda keeping a very fast hand. Despite being stuck on mana, I think he's actually kind of ahead on this board state.
All right, so we know that there's a
No, this one doesn't get this one
Fiery
doesn't do
Temper in
something.
hand, right? So if we have Fiery Temper in hand, if we find a mana to cast that one, that's 3 damage. That pumps the Steamkin up to a 4/4. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 11 from the trigger of the Hired Claw. So that's lethal. Land is lethal here if Jeremy attacks.
Oh, he's attacking.
He's gonna draw 2 cards though.
Yep.
Draw 2.
Plus, Rattle Chains does let Jeremy play creatures at flash speed, so this is pretty relevant for.
As long as they're spirits.
Yep.
And I mean, the other one is Braids and Bar, which has flash.
So is that the Snowman land?
Yep, that's the Faceless Haven. So that technically a spirit. Faceless Haven activates for 3. It becomes a 4/3 with all creature types, so it's Snow Mutavault. And that looks like that might just be the play here, is holding up the mana to activate it, and then potentially, like you said, we still have Aether Gust in hand. It looks like there may be 1 additional spirit here from Jeremy as well.
So many cards under these Bomat Couriers.
Duda could probably start a new deck with everything that's underneath there.
Yeah.
Oh, he's doing this right now.
Oh, he's gonna show him the Fiery Temper. Oh, dude, actually doing this kind of earlier than I would expect.
Yeah.
I would have thought that he would wait for Jeremy to activate the Faceless. Oh, Jeremy also not doing that. Aether
Lofty
Gust?
Denial.
Aether Gust?
Rattle chains.
Rattle Chains?
Okay.
Oh, he's gonna sack to make it indestructible.
Also,
Just when it enters the battlefield, it gives it hexproof. So Rattle Chains giving that hexproof, and I guess Duda was going at the creature instead of upstairs, and then Jeremy is also going to wind up having this Aether Gust come into play.
All right, Duda, anything at flash speed, you can make mana here.
I believe Jeremy should have taken 1 from the Hired Claw as well. So Jeremy should be at an effective 9, which would put him down to 7 if this Aether Gust resolves, which with no cards playable from Duda's side.
wait, yeah.
I think there's a Witch Stalker Frenzy in hand.
I think there's no lands in Duda's hand.
Yeah,
Or, oh, there's Mutavault.
there's a Mutavault.
So we miss a trigger here for 1 damage.
Okay, they remember
But
the Higher Claw trigger.
Wasn't the discard your hand? So that fizzled, but then this goes before you get the cards, right?
Oh, so we're saying.
No, you can't split the trigger like that.
Stack.
I think what's happening is the sacrifice is on the stack.
So
The Fiery Temper is part of the discard because discarding is
Or
the
no, it already
cost
resolved, right?
for
So you
Bomat
discard it and
Courier.
then get
well, I
the
just
cards.
that is
and
correct.
Sacrifice Womack Courier, and then the.
Then I think regardless, like Duda generates the mana.
Then before that.
There's no reason not to.
Get the 3 red,
Okay. Yeah.
and I'll. Put
Yeah, so is going to wind up floating 3 red. So Duda will potentially have mana to play with here, or could potentially just sacrifice the other Bomat Courier.
ability resolves. We should be at. Are we in combat So we are in combat.
We are in combat. So
We are in combat.
yeah, I'll take the one from that.
From the lizard.
All right, so they have the higher claw trigger. So there's just a big messy stack of triggers going on here. Duda, before combat, or before damage still, is tapping 2 to pump the higher claw.
Yep.
And we do have a rattle change as well. And okay, so we're going to Witchstalker's Frenzy this rattle change because we did have enough creatures attacking to only make it cost 1 mana. So that, at the end of the day, Duda will have done 4 total damage.
Second main.
Yep.
That was a messy
Duda
turn,
went
but it wound up coming up better for Jeremy than we thought it might.
Okay.
Yeah.
During combat, I think.
Jerem?
So.
Yeah.
Is in a surprisingly good spot right now. Having a land does also let him build up some sort of counter magic or interactive spell while swinging in the face of save in here. Oh, but he tapped it.
Sure.
Supreme Phantom to buff the team.
All right, so this will make 5 damage now from this rattle
This
change.
is now 5, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Duda going to 8. Jeremy drawing 2 cards.
And then draw 2.
This might be the last effective turn here in this game. Let's see what he
Yeah,
drew.
land second main.
Okay,
and
okay.
a
He almost played the lofty dial.
Mausoleum Wanderer. All right, Wanderer's on the battlefield. That's a 2/2. Supreme Phantom's a 1/3. We have a 2/3 and a 1/1 on Duda's side, and we know that Steamkin was on top.
Is that another fiery temper?
That is another fiery temper.
1, 2, 3, 4. No matter what, Jeremy's gonna take 1 unless he can bounce the higher claw pre-combat. So effectively, Duda has to try and do 5 here. Yeah, that is the unfortunate part. If Duda had aimed fiery temper upstairs, I think this would be game.
Yeah. Looks like there may be... Duda has the angle of discarding his hand, using Fiery Temper,
plenty of time to
potentially going upstairs.
fast.
Could also try to hit one of the spirits. Don't know if Jeremy revealed enough of that lofty denial for Duda to know it's there.
Yeah.
So we know that Duda can't actually do lethal with the Fiery Temper this turn.
That is true, that is true.
And without putting up any flying blockers, or without putting up a defense against Jeremy, that means that Jeremy's doesn't need to block at all either. So we're just gonna have Higher Claw.
Oh, interesting. What the rest of the cards in Duda's hand is, because he's thinking really hard about this.
There was Runaway Steamkin, Fiery Temper, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and I forget the last one. If it's Witchstalker's Frenzy, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, but... Oh, Animate Mutable.
One of those Higher Claws does not have haste.
Wait. It's not hasty. It's not hasty. Duda, stop.
You may want to go figure this out for them, because that Higher Claw just got played this turn.
So let me see how I'm going to block it.
You just played the other higher claw this turn, right? It does get a trigger, but you can't attack.
Okay. I didn't notice that.
So you can't attack with the Higher Claw, but like as Eric did mention over the microphone, it will still get the 2 damage being played here, because you are seeing both of them are seeing a lizard attack.
I'm going to block.
Yep, so let's see here.
And
I mean, is Jeremy just happy going to 1?
and you're tapped mana-wise.
Jeremy could go down to 1. Duda's tapped out, but has yet to
yeah.
play a land, so that may be what Jeremy is considering here. And then Jeremy has 3/8 in the air.
Okay. Jeremy goes to 1. Let's see what Duda's got. Oh,
Duda has no land.
Duda passed the turn. Duda,
It's Fable, Steamkin, and Unknown card. Jeremy, though, with 8 face-up damage on the table. There's no mana for
5,
Duda.
6, 7, 8. Duda's dead, isn't he?
Everything flies. 8 flying damage.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Jeremy sees it. Duda scoops it. Jeremy on a mulligan to 6. Game number 3 comes back and takes the matchup. 2 games to 1.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Congratulations, Jeremy. One of those spirits really showing his real power.